It's one of the greatest archaeological treasures ever found.
You look at it and you're in awe of the workmanship.
Glittering Dark Age relics resurrected from a forgotten hiding place by an amateur and his old metal detector.
Some people walk past and say, that's the chap who found all that gold.
Forged more than 1,000 years ago, the treasure is casting a new and brilliant light on a turbulent age.
On the top of the cranium, the sharp injury by either a sword or an axe.
Dark Age faces emerged from ancient Staffordshire soil.
It's usually at those points you realise you've probably found something that's really exciting them.
Wow, yes.
Good heaven.
Compelling stories lost in the mists of time were revealed in vivid detail.
The Staffordshire hoard is not just as exciting as it was when it first came out. It's more exciting because we're starting to understand it.
A treasure sparkling with priceless clues, piercing the shadowy veil that has obscured the enigmatic era dubbed the Dark Ages. It's the prickle of excitement that drives amateur treasure hunters across forlorn, freezing fields all over Britain. For Terry Herbert, the beep of a metal detector led to a breathtaking discovery. More than 1,500 pieces of silver and gold. The nature of these objects meant they were far more valuable than the millions of pounds they represented in mere scrap value.
What I'd found was equivalent to finding Tutankhamun's treasure. Why me? Why have I found it? Why has other people been on this field, detected, and never found it? Was I destined to find it? I just don't know.
Whatever the reason, the apparently barren, featureless field surrendered far more than silver and gold. It was the lavish detail contained in Terry's treasure that attracted national and international attention. The multi-million-pound monetary value was shared between Terry and the landowner, Fred Johnson.
Right, that's just a clean, it's literally...
In return, Britain secured ownership of a hoard that would prove priceless in historic and academic value. The Birmingham and Stoke museums took joint custody. The first of a series of painstaking jobs was to carefully pick away more than 1,000 years of dirt from each piece. Intriguing details began to emerge, thanks to some lateral thinking and a primitive tool provided by Mother Nature.
We felt that we needed to maybe just think about the tools that we were using, with the gold being a fairly soft material. And after batting it around for a while in the department, we came up with the idea of using some kind of natural pointy thing.
Thorns proved to be the sharpest tools in the box, strong enough to dislodge dirt, but soft enough to protect the precious metal underneath. A combination of primitive and highly sophisticated instruments began to reveal stunning detail on the Dark Age treasure, and more would follow. After the initial find of around 1,500 pieces, the site yielded even more treasure. Subsequent digs made a total of 3,500 objects. Most were tiny, others were larger, like this garnet-studded gold piece found wedged inside a sword pommel. Pieces of an ancient puzzle began to come together, and it was clear that some of the precious fragments weren't designed to adorn bodies, but to destroy them.
I'm really interested in this piece because it brings home what these things were really used for. It's a pair of hilt plates, or a hilt plate and a tray. On one side, we can see a slot tapering at both ends to show the wicked cutting edges of this hacking sword, a really chilling piece of equipment. And
yeah, that's very sharp, isn't it?
It's very, very sharp. And beautifully shaped for its function as a weapon. And there are marks around the whole...
Yes, you can just see the imprint of one of these little filigree wire hilt bindings.
So the grip is here. My hand is my imaginary grip.
Suddenly you see the business end, all the cold steel.
In turbulent times, weapons were often far more valuable than coins or jewels. The remains of a young man who lived around the same time show telltale signs of a violent end, hacked to death in a forgotten battle.
What we're seeing here very much is a whole series of injuries coming in from all different directions. What we've got on the top of the cranium here is a sharp injury that's been sustained by either a sword or an axe, flaking away a bit of bone, and you can see that the spongy bone on the inside of the cranium is actually exposed, but obviously it didn't go all the way through to where the brain is. He's actually also got a fracture to his mandible. This is something that's more associated with a blunt object. He's also got a series of 3 different fractures around the back of his cranium, one here, and one here. He's also got a fracture to this vertebra, the first cervical vertebra. And what you can see is that the blade has actually passed right the way through the spinal cord. So overall, this individual sustained 33 separate injuries around the time of death.
Double-edged swords were one of many different kinds of weapons used to kill. Siaks were single-edged, all-purpose knives that gave those who wielded them their name. Saxons, men of the siaks, or men of the knife.
Most of the hilt fittings clearly are sword hilt fittings. We have a few Sax hilt fittings, not very many. What we do have are some quite unique pieces. They are very rare things.
The pieces found in the Staffordshire hoard were not only rare, but of the highest quality.
There was actually a shadow that you could see on the top of this piece. Now, again, purely by chance, I realised that just a couple of minutes earlier I'd been looking at the piece that must have sat there, because the shadow is a very distinctive shape, and this piece is exactly the right shape to fit. Now, that first piece, there's a very distinctive decoration forming a panel around the edge. And looking at that decoration, it suddenly came to me that we had 2 other pieces that had the same decoration on, which are these 2. So we had 4 pieces that belonged together and seemed to be obviously part of one piece, one object. Now, what made it clear what we were looking at was that, because you can see there's a shape where a knife blade has come out of this handle. So clearly we're looking at a knife handle. This is the bottom of the handle, as you can tell by the blade coming out. What you would then have had is the hand grip, and at the top of the handle you had this piece with the flange. We had this that we hoped would actually match that flange, and when we put the 2 together, it did. And that one fitted beautifully on top of there. So there we have the most part of the top of the knife handle, and this last piece, unfortunately, it's damaged because of the way it's been taken apart. But that would sit here, on top of where the shadow is. So we're looking at a very, very elaborate knife handle. I mean, there's about 88 grams of gold in this, which is something like 3 ounces of gold. So this is a very important piece. I mean, it would have belonged to somebody of the highest quality in Anglo-Saxon times.
It was an extraordinary discovery, but it raised another question. Where were the blades of all these magnificent weapons?
The Anglo-Saxons valued the blades as much, if not more, than the gold fittings on the hilts. Because the blade was the thing that was going to defend your life.
The period between the end of the Roman Empire and the middle 11th century is known as the Dark Ages, because few written records survive from that time in Britain and much of Western Europe. The Saxons didn't leave a legacy of impressive monuments or learning, but the weapons they left behind speak volumes about their skill as craftsmen.
On some levels, the Saxon smithy would be a very simple thing, but I don't think the people who were producing these blades were simple smiths. I think they would have been specialists. The blades that they used back then were being used in reality. Now, a sword blade has to be tough. It also has to have an element of hardness. It needs to maintain a good edge. It needs to have the correct geometry so it will cut through things. So it's actually, it's quite a complex piece of engineering.
Blades were crafted using a technique known as pattern welding, which also creates swirls and ripples in the metal. To show just how much skill went into making one, modern-day swordsmith Owen Bush attempted to craft a replica Seax blade to fit the precious fittings found in the Staffordshire hoard. He sandwiched almost 300 layers of pre-formed steel together. The white-hot steel sandwich was the building block of a pattern-welded knife.
I'm going to fold this material and it will become the edge. It's very similar to the techniques the Japanese used to make their samurai swords.
Modern hydraulic hammers land 240 blows a minute. A Saxon smith would need an 8-man sledgehammer team working non-stop to get the same force and speed.
So compared to my Saxon brethren, it's quite a tool and a big advantage.
The back of the blade was next.
I'm twisting this bar. It's going to be a decorative element for the back of the sax.
Twisting the hot steel up to 50 times creates star and chevron patterns along the back of the blade. But it also adds strength, a brilliant Anglo-Saxon engineering innovation. Metalwork for the middle section required sawing triangular notches out of one bar that was pressed into another.
That'll give me an interlocking pattern like teeth running along the edge of the blade.
Modern smiths need sophisticated equipment like a 250-ton power press to do the job. Saxon smiths had little more than fire, hammers and muscle.
They're acting in a very complex engineering way, which, considering this is how the Saxons made their blades, is quite amazing.
But it's skill, rather than 21st century technology, that's needed to bring all the individual pieces together. Forge welding is the final critical step that makes a finely crafted blade out of raw steel. The temperatures, pressures and hammer blows have to be just right. The dying art of metalworking. The replica Saxon Seax began to take shape. Even with an array of machines, modern tools and pre-formed, pre-shaped steel, it took almost 6 hours to make a single blade. An Anglo-Saxon smith would have needed at least a week to make the same thing. It's an impressive result. But what of the jewel-studded gold adornments? Like today, the gold would have been hard to find in England. It must have come from somewhere else. Gold was scarce in 7th century Britain. The Saxon craftsmen commissioned to make such masterpieces had to make the most of their precious materials.
Gold objects tend to be hollow. They tend to be fabricated, made up like boxes of bottom, sides and top.
Most of the gold objects found in the Staffordshire hoard are hollow, but their weight is significant. The different shades of gold are also striking and provide a clue as to the source of the precious metal. The different colours suggest impurities. Like chemical fingerprints, impurities can point to where gold comes from. British Museum investigators analysed the gold with X-ray fluorescence.
X-ray fluorescence is often at the museum sort of known as the curator's dream instrument because it can be used on practically any material. It doesn't require samples to be taken, you're not making contact with the object. It gives you an elemental composition at a particular spot. You're firing an X-ray beam at the surface, it's interacting with the different atoms that are present, and depending on the X-ray that are collected, the energies are very characteristic of the different elements.
The samples tested more than 75% pure, the equivalent of around 18 carats, fine jewellery-grade gold. But X-ray testing also revealed other metals like silver and copper, which might have been added when the gold was reused. Gold has always been a precious commodity, endlessly recycled over the ages. Impurities can be introduced each time gold is melted down and reworked. The question remained, where did the Saxons get their gold in the first place?
The likely source of a lot of this gold is probably the Byzantine Empire. It's the superpower of its day. Supposedly, when this gentleman, Justinian I, when he comes to the throne in 527, he is said to have inherited a treasury which contained 400,000 pounds weight of gold. So, you know, in Staffordshire we have maybe 11 pounds in the hoard. So this is why I'm talking about Byzantium as the superpower and the likely source of much of this gold ultimately.
Before it was renamed Istanbul, Constantinople was once the capital of ancient Byzantium. Gold and other precious metals are still traded in the city today. As the place where Asia meets Europe, East meets West, it has always held a strategic geographic and economic position. In the 7th century, Byzantium was one of the richest places on earth, a trading empire that spanned the civilized world.
This is a solidus of the Emperor Anastasius, end of 5th, early 6th century, and this type of coin is being considered as the dollar of the Middle Ages. The fact that they can conduct their business from one end of the earth to the other using this precious coin. So Byzantium did know about Britain, and Britain did know about Byzantium. Merchants and sailors, also coming from Britain, knew about Byzantium and came back full of stories and, of course, merchandise.
In Anglo-Saxon Britain, such currency was rare.
By the beginning of the 5th century, when essentially Rome loses control in Britain, the money economy collapses. Gold coins in the 7th century are rare, I mean very rare. I think your average Saxon would scarcely have seen a coin, let alone have come into contact with them. Money itself does not really feature for most people.
Coins were a convenient, highly transportable source of precious metals like gold. Perhaps Byzantine gold was used to adorn the fine and fearsome weapons of high-status Anglo-Saxons in Britain. It's estimated that more than 3,000 Byzantine gold coins would have been needed to make the objects in the Staffordshire hoard. If Dark Age Anglo-Saxons traded in foreign gold, perhaps such trade brought jewels as well. The Staffordshire hoard is studded with thousands of rich red gems, garnets. These multi-shaded semi-precious stones were not mined in Britain. Where did they come from? Intriguingly, samples were taken to the home of other kinds of masterpieces to find an answer. As well as priceless art, the Louvre in Paris also houses a particle accelerator. Such a device can read chemical clues contained in gems like garnets.
Garnet is a mineral, and the composition of a garnet is not a fixed composition. It's not the same as other gemstones. A garnet is a family of gemstones. There are half a dozen of them, and each has a specific composition.
Bombarding the garnets with a high-energy light beam revealed their unique chemical fingerprints. It was hoped that these fingerprints might reveal where the individual Dark Age garnets were mined.
Is it possible to see that one again?
Yes.
I hope so.
That's...
Individual stones could be precisely targeted.
Maximum, if I remember well. You did
No,
right?
it's okay, yeah. I think no, we are crossing it. I thought maybe...
You want, where do you want to go?
Here.
To the mushroom? Analyzing garnets, for instance, using the accelerator is very simple. You communicate energy, and then the material absorbs it and re-emits it, but with a different energy. And if you look at the energy emitted, then you have inside this energy the signal of the composition. And so the signal is different from one garnet to the other, depending on the composition. From this experiment, we derive the accurate composition of the garnets. It's a very accurate technique. And it is due to the fact that it's very accurate that we can distinguish one garnet coming from that mine to a garnet coming from the other one.
More than 400 stones were tested. As well as chemical composition, forensic analysis also revealed other intriguing details. The cut and polish work was exquisite. Saxon craftsmen hand-cut the gems into intricate shapes and then polished flat facets perfectly smooth. It was yet another remarkable feat by Dark Age artisans. A collection of the kind of tools they used was found less than 100 miles from where the hoard was buried.
What we've got in front of us here is a unique find from the British Isles. It's a collection of tools found in the grave of a 7th century metalworker. This man, if he wasn't directly involved with the high-grade metalwork we see in the Staffordshire hoard, certainly got an acquaintance with it.
Gemstone cutting and polishing in the 7th century was an exact, time-consuming job requiring expert hands.
And the individual pieces of garnet will be mounted on a thing called a dopstick, a piece of wood. And then applied to a turning wheel. The wheel would be revolved backwards and forwards using a bow and a piece of string. The wheel would be made out of soft, copper or iron, and applied to that will be a cutting material, an abrasive, probably wet sand, and that will bite into the garnet and allow the stones to be shaped. There are problems with this. There are a lot of things we don't understand. Why didn't the cutting wheels wear out? How did they keep the sharp profiles? Because we've got sharp corners on a lot of these cut stones. So much we don't understand and need to investigate.
Archaeological investigations continued at the field where the gems and gold objects were found. Researchers were hoping to find more clues in and around the site that could tell them why the treasure was buried there in the first place. So-called geophys equipment was used to survey the site for any anomalies in electrical resistance underground. These can point to buried features like post holes, wall foundations, or burials. It took a week to collect and collate the information. The result was a kind of three-dimensional map of potential archaeological targets, identified as white dots. Among many dots, one feature looked particularly promising. A long curved line in the same spot where the hoard was found. At the site where an amateur metal detector found a hoard of Saxon gold, archaeologists investigated an intriguing feature. A mysterious curve had shown up on a ground survey.
When they carried out the geophysical survey, they found that curving line in the area where the hoard was found that we all thought to begin with was going to be a ditch.
All they found was sandy soil and an odd band of clay.
When they excavated on the site, we didn't find what we most wanted to find, which was a context for the hoard, a pit-to-post hole, a box, or better still, some associated structures so that it had been placed in a building or something that represents a shrine. There was nothing like that.
It was disappointing, but not a dead end. Another team of environmental archaeologists were called in. They took samples from different parts of the site to find out what it looked like 1,300 years ago. Perhaps the landscape could reveal why this spot was chosen as a burial place for Saxon treasure.
Generally, archaeologists like their archaeology in context, in sealed layers that we can date. Of course, the issue with the hoard was that the gold is, of course, found in the plough soil, so that's effectively a disturbed context. So really, our first phase of work was to see if we could find any other archaeological contexts on the site that were more reliably sealed and might contain environmental material that might help us understand the sort of context of the archaeology itself.
The kind of environmental material they wanted was microscopic. Pollen particles can reconstruct a lost ancient landscape.
Anyone who has hay fever will know, of course, pollen gets liberated in huge quantities in the spring and the summer, and that pollen can end up being washed or blown into deposits, into particular deposits that accumulate. The pollen is preserved within the sediment. In the case of archaeological sites, as the layers of archaeology build up, the pollen, of course, builds up with it. So, what we can do is extract sequences through the archaeological layers, and effectively we end up with a record of the changing vegetation reconstructed from those archaeological layers.
Plant pollen, insects, and seeds could build up a picture of what lived and grew there in the 7th century.
What the sequence seems to show is a progressive loss of woodland over time. So going from maybe a landscape with sort of patchy woodland as evidence for trees such as alder that are growing probably in the bottom of the valley below the site on the damper soils. And we think on the hill slopes itself we have lots of heather pollen, so a sort of heathy environment.
Using environmental evidence, it was possible to reconstruct what the hill looked like in Saxon times. A scrubby landscape of heather and clumps of trees. The band of clay around the hill supported different vegetation, making it a local natural landmark. It was a natural hiding place where buried treasure could easily be found again. The site was also close to a man-made feature, the ancient Roman road of Watling Street. Perhaps this road, built 400 years before Anglo-Saxon Britain, was used to transport the treasure. Results from the gemstone analysis in Paris were intriguing. Ingenious repairs were found. In this case, a missing garnet had been replaced with a piece of amber. Another beautiful checkerboard patterned object was found to be made of ancient Roman glass. It could have been 500 years old when it was reworked, a stunning example of Saxon recycling. A similar object was also made of recycled Roman glass. The different pieces had the same chemical signature. They had all come from the same piece of cobalt blue glass, perhaps a reused Roman mosaic tile. They were probably made in the same workshop, by the same craftsman. The composition of the garnets and other gems told another fascinating story. Like the gold, the jewels came from around the world. Cabochon garnets in the large centerpieces of various crosses have a chemical signature similar to garnets mined in Sri Lanka and India. Perhaps Roman traders had brought them back into the empire and transformed them into jewellery, before Anglo-Saxons acquired and recycled them centuries later. The more numerous flat-cut garnets showed high levels of magnesium and chromium, the chemical signature of garnets mined in Bohemia or the modern-day Czech Republic. There's no way of knowing when they were mined, but they would have been bought and sold before finding their way into Saxon workshops. It seemed as if the Dark Ages were illuminated by burgeoning trade. Staffordshire's Saxon treasure was revealing all kinds of amazing detail.
I hope I'm not wrong here. I think that looks like a very long-jawed person with a moustache and a brow.
I'm only going to be able to see it up close.
You'll have to look at it.
You have a look and then let me have a look at it.
Yeah, ditto.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, fantastic.
So we've got a human face on one side and a boar's head on the other. I think you're right.
It needs cleaning. I mean, we're standing here speculating.
I know.
Yeah. A rib running down the front of the hand with a crest.
It's part of the
crest.
Going into the nasal.
It's looking birdy to me, I have to say.
When you're cleaning the objects, it is fantastic to get the reveal, and it's actually really nice when you're working alongside a curator or researcher as well, and they've actually looked at a slightly soil-covered piece and go, I want you to clean this area because I feel there's something important under here, so you're working with them. So in some respects, you're cleaning, and under the microscope, you can see, you know, the metals and the shapes appearing. And we have a monitor to one side, so the curator researcher's kind of on your shoulder looking at the screen, and sometimes you hear them talk, and other times they go very quiet, and it's usually at those points you realise you've probably found something that's really exciting them.
A Saxon face gazed back over 1,300 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Good heavens. I'd like to look at his eyes again to see. I wouldn't want to knock his pint of beer over in a bar, would you?
No.
Looking at a pommel cap being cleaned and seeing animals and faces emerging, and to be the first people to see those faces and those animals for 1,300 years. They've never been seen before. It's an incredible process of discovery.
So it's one of these dual images, which they do so well.
The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Despite some severe damage, its dual design had survived the ravages of time. When viewed on one side, a helmeted face emerged. When turned, the human face transformed into that of some kind of animal. The Saxons often deliberately disguised their animal artwork.
The Anglo-Saxons loved riddles, and they put these visual riddles on the objects, and we're seeing those and sort of sharing a clever idea over 1,300 years, something that they enjoyed. It's lovely to be sharing these things over so much time. We can look at the things that have travelled in time, and we enjoy the things that they enjoyed.
These exquisite objects have survived, but their meaning and the Anglo-Saxon culture has long disappeared.
It's unlikely that any of this was art for art's sake. There are meanings in there. The birds and the animals would have carried a meaning, but that's long forgotten.
Some of the hoard's most mysterious objects are these tiny pieces of embossed silver depicting stylized warriors and animals. They've been broken into more than 100 pieces.
There are strange things going on there. Processions of warriors kneeling or running. Warriors wearing helmets with birds' head crests on them.
Experts suspected such objects adorned a warrior's helmet, but they couldn't be sure. Only 4 Anglo-Saxon helmets had ever been found in Britain. If they were pieces of a warrior's helmet, they could have been the most significant find in the entire hoard.
Lots of the marching warrior scenes seem to follow the same basic designs. Warriors with eagle-crested helmets marching one direction, boar-crested helmets marching the opposite direction. I've managed to make some partial reconstructions of what the images may be on the foils. These are in wax ready for casting in bronze, then they can be used to lay a thin foil over the top. You put a sheet of lead on top of that, and then you beat the lead to press the foil onto the bronze die underneath. So each one will come up with the original form.
Looking at the foils we've got, the total area they seem to represent wouldn't cover the top of a helmet.
It may be that we have the scraps that have come from an entire helmet. We may have the selective pickings that have been ripped off broken helmets over a period of time.
Experts investigating intriguing pieces of embossed Saxon silver thought they may have formed part of a helmet.
The pieces that we suspected were eyebrows from the helmet originally appeared to fit possibly on the front of a helmet as an eyebrow piece.
I was never happy with that.
They follow a nice curvature. It was a possible.
It turned out that other gold pieces in the hoard were a better fit. Together, they seemed to form a new kind of accessory.
They sit fairly comfortably on top of the original cheek piece.
So it's goodbye eyebrows.
The pieces seemed to belong to a newly discovered kind of Saxon decoration between the cheek piece and the body of the helmet. But experts couldn't be sure. Much of the detail surrounding the find also remained a mystery. Who buried it there and why?
We're a very long way off understanding it. I'm not sure that we'll ever understand why it was collected and why it came to be buried. It could have been hidden away in the face of a perceived threat. It could simply be loot, but then in each case we get back to the fact, why is it mainly weapon fittings?
At first, they thought the hoard was battlefield loot collected after an epic fight. But as more details emerged, they realized that the hoard could not have come from one battle. Some of the treasure was already old when it was buried. Perhaps it was brought to Britain during 6th century invasions. The two oldest pieces are carved with faces, boars' heads, and strange animals. They could both date from as early as the year 550. But the style of other pieces suggests they date from much later. A folded cross could be as late as 680. Other pieces could range anywhere from the late 6th to the 8th centuries. The so-called helmet piece and another unknown object are likely to be even later in date. Other pieces, including one with a Christian inscription, are 8th century. It means the hoard could cover a wide time frame spanning some 150 years. The Staffordshire hoard is slowly revealing some of its secrets. The large amount of high-status gold battleware points to the existence of a previously unknown warrior elite. Researchers know that gold and garnets came from as far away as India and Sri Lanka. It seems trade was just as rich as the skills of amazing Anglo-Saxon craftsmen. The Dark Ages never looked so bright.
After 2 years, the Staffordshire hoard is not just as exciting as it was when it first came out. It's more exciting because we're starting to understand it. It's a wonderful process because we never know what's going to come out. This is a process of exploring. We're exploring the past, and we're looking at the 7th century, this heroic age, and beginning to understand something of this amazing time.
Get on board the world's fastest train. Brand new tomorrow at 9. Stay tuned to National Geographic Channel for the truth behind UFOs.